Um, Welcome to this emergent interview on the intersection of art, catalyst hubs, cooperatives, and co-creating a mutualistic culture. We'll be looking at the possible mutual intersections of Kate Redman's cooperative model and Laura McKinney's downtown revitalization program fueled by the arts. Now, I say this interview is emergent because Kate and Laurie have only communicated directly with each other via text until now. So, brief introductions. Kate Redman is the founder of Commongrounds, a real estate cooperative in Traverse City, Michigan. Is co-developed, co-owned by the nonprofits and community-serving businesses that will be in the building, as well as everyday community members with just a minimum $50 investment. It is designed to be a catalyst hub for its members to be the change they wish to see in the neighborhood, which is the theme of our Radical Catalyst Club. It is one of the only ground-up mixed-use cooperatives in the U.S. and it's also designed to serve as a laboratory for others to replicate, which is partially why Laurie's here. Kate is looking to Laurie also for inspiration in infusing more of the arts into their project. So Laurie McKinney is the founder of an arts collective, a community arts gallery and store, a cultural festival, and several arts events and programs in Princeton, West Virginia. She's helped provide the foundation for multiple do-it-yourself businesses, including pottery, woodwork, music production. She hosts a TED Talk, meets rock concert, educational roadshow, and writes and performs original songs that expresses everything I just mentioned. She also just founded a Princeton Catalyst Club with a goal of developing Catalyst Club cooperatives throughout downtown Princeton, modeled off of Kate's program. So I thought we'd start this program off by having Kate and Laurie share their project elevator pitches in their own words, and then let them have an open dialogue about how they can learn from each other, and then can open up to some Q&A. So Kate, do you want to start?
Sure. Our framing question for Commongrounds was, what would you build in your community if you could build whatever you wanted to make your community better for the people that live there? And our community is under a lot of growth pressure. We're a big tourist destination and a big second home destination. So we have a lot of development happening, and the people that live here often feel like what's being developed doesn't necessarily serve them. So we decided to build a 4-story building that's owned by the community and by the nonprofits and small businesses that are housed in the building. It has workforce housing, early childhood care, both of which are kind of crisis needs in our community. And then there's a craft food entrepreneur incubator, food hall space, a small performing arts space, and then the space I operate, which is a co-working and shared office and meeting space for nonprofits and small business. And we say that the building is focused on food, family, arts, and wellness, and integrating people and organizations that are working in those areas in our community. We did a community crowdfunding campaign where we raised almost 1.4 million from 500 people, and we'll pay that money back with interest to help build wealth in our community over time. People could buy in starting as low as $50. And we're using that money to leverage the money for the rest of the project, which is about $14.5 million. We're breaking ground this year and hoping to have the building done by fall 2021.
Laurie?
Awesome. Yeah, so I believe really firmly in the transformative power of music and the arts. My partner Robert and I started a festival called Culture Fest back in 2004, and that along with open mic nights and an Earth Day festival and a few other events were kind of like a seed that we planted. We always wanted to have a creative community, and 16 years later, it's really blossoming. We planted roots in 2006 in a building in our downtown. We have a music venue and recording studio, an art gallery downstairs, and an artist studio on the second floor. And the whole intention is to bring people together and to use that healing power of music and the arts to transform the world outwardly. And recently, we've had hit an acceleration point with our downtown. A lot of people on the call today are business owners in our downtown, just a real blossoming. And I've been thinking a lot about what's next, and thinking about activating various buildings on our street. And my main interest in this whole mutual stakeholding and co-op model is that there's so many people who would like to have a say in what happens next in the neighborhood. And you always hear people say, well, what they should do is this, or what we need is that. And they don't have that entry point because not everybody can just come in and buy a building or start a business. And so really want to let everyone in our community have access to have a say in and agency in what happens next in our neighborhood. So it's super exciting to have access to this information and this network of people to explore all the possibilities.
So now I'm going to step back and let Kate and Laurie just talk to each other as if they're sitting at a coffee house on a couch, and you guys can just take it from here.
All right, thanks, Neil. I want to say even though Lori and I will talk as if we're just talking to each other, I do think all of you are here, and if you have questions, feel free to chime in. It seems silly to waste having all this collective experience and good energy here.
Yeah, we'll have Q&A after you guys chat for a little bit. So, and if you have any questions, post it in the chat room, as well as raise your hand when we have a Q&A time. So go ahead.
Well, Lori, I'm super curious to learn more, just kind of context to start about what Princeton is like and kind of what your tie to the community is and how you ended up there and started doing the work that you're doing.
Sure. So this is actually my hometown, and I was like most young people. I just wanted to get out and go see the world. I wanted my parents to ship me to New York. I actually asked them to do that. They would not, and I just was hungry and passionate. So, went and traveled and did schooling. And then I just had these coming of age epiphanies, recognizing the power of creativity and how I could use it to make a positive impact on the world. And that was through a series of coming of age epiphanies. And so I just kind of stepped off the current course that I was on, which was music theater. I had ended up picking music theater as a major. It wasn't quite the right fit. And so I just sort of like started to trust my intuition and soul searching, and my journey just like led me back home unexpectedly. And I had these epiphanies that you can create wherever you are. And in a place like here, we're really needed here. So this work is super fulfilling. And it all unfolded in a really organic way, just kind of like was watching for open doors, just wanting to have an impact. And so Princeton is the city limits population is 6,500. The areas surrounding, like the rural areas surrounding Princeton, are more like 30,000, and our county has 60,000 people in it. And the downtown is the same story of everyone that you've heard. It was choked out by shopping malls, and with the economic downturn from the decline of the coal industry, that kind of confounded the situation. And so it was just a pretty desolate stretch of town, whereas before it had been the place to be. In Mercer Street's heyday, it was every American downtown, theaters and restaurants and hotels, and there's so much nostalgia, and the community is so passionate about the bygone days of Mercer Street. But now we've said for a long time that someday people are going to look back at this as the new good old days. And I think right now, when people are kind of forcefully like not able to be here anymore, I think immediately in a moment our entire community started recognizing that, yeah, this was the new good old days. And this new energy of 20, 30, 40 somethings that was not here before, because our biggest export in West Virginia has been our young people. So we're in this new moment in time where people like Brandon and Lacey and Billy and all these entrepreneurs like Tammy are here creating. And so it's like it's kind of like a rebirth of what originally built our downtown. And I think that two generations or the two sectors of people are starting to recognize how that's all connected.
Are you seeing a lot of people that grew up there leave and then come back, or boomerang as we call it in Traverse City? I don't know if you guys use that term too.
Yeah, a lot is relative. In a town this size and with the scope of it all, a handful of people can make a tremendous difference. So we've had handfuls of people that have done that, like Brandon's a boomerang. And so, we've had, handfuls of people that have come back, but that actually is really super impactful. We're seeing more expats coming in, like, on holiday to visit family and discovering what's happening and thinking, wow, I could move back, or I could be a part of this from afar. We're definitely seeing an acceleration of that type of activity.
I'm curious to hear, like, in a little more detail about what the kind of stages and evolution you've gone through, and how much of where you're at now you envisioned from the beginning, or how much of it has taken turns that you weren't expecting.
Yeah, there's a little of both of that, but pretty much everything that we're experiencing now, we thought naively that it was going to take like 5 to 8 years, and it actually ended up taking 16. So we definitely envisioned a lot vibrant public art, all the storefronts full of creative and entrepreneurial pursuits, and people returning to the streets, and people of all ages having joyous experiences. And so it was all very intentional, and the gathering of the people was like a slow trickle, and then it was like a snowball. And so now it's all just bigger than the sum of its parts, and all these different people doing all these different things. And it took a lot longer than we had expected.
So Laura, do you have any questions for Kate?
Yeah, I do. So I'm really curious about, I know that you have to talk a lot about the structure, and I know there's a lot of documents that really explain like the nuts and bolts of the structure, but I know Brandon's on the call and he had been asking questions about one about the structure and like legalities and things. But one question that I have is about the process that when you have the group together and determines what happens within the building. Like I know that we know that the money isn't equivalent to votes. Like it's not how much you buy into it equals how much voice that you have. And I've heard Neil talk a little bit about like you can buy in for your community share at $50 or with $50 worth of sweat equity. And I'm just curious about the process of how that all shakes down.
Yeah, so there's two classes of ownership in the building. One is for the community, and that's people can pay $50, or people have to pay $50 and they become an owner. And we have just over 500 community owners. And if you put in your $50, you're not ever guaranteed to get any financial return back from that. That's just kind of your buy-in to the co-op. And then if the co-op ever goes under, you could in theory get that $50 back if there's money left over. But to that group of people is who we said, hey, do you guys want to invest more money in this building? And then our investment structure was basically just a loan from those folks. So they're, we'll pay them back 7% interest, they'll get their money back. And then we'll buy them out their loan amount after 10 years. And, with the way that co-ops work, and I don't know, here, maybe show how familiar you are with co-op structure. Like I know it really well to, I don't know anything about it, to somewhere in the middle. Okay, I didn't figure out how much to assume. So co-ops, the idea is really that you're selling things at cost to the people that use them. So any kind of co-op, you have to create what's called patronage and define that and say, what is it that you're selling to the people that own you? So if you're a grocery store, that's easy. It's like, how many groceries are you selling? For us and the community, we haven't developed yet what the patronage will be, because the main point of the community ownership is engagement in the building and what's happening there and the activities more than a financial return. We have the investment structure, but other than that, if you're a community owner, it's that you paid your $50 and that you're a part of this building project. I imagine that we will have activities in the building. We're going to use open book management, where we have quarterly meetings where we're tracking financial and social impact metrics and invite people in to contribute and collaborate on those. And probably we'll track like how many of those meetings do you come to. And then if we're generating some kind of income from that community impact, we could provide financial return to people on that. But that's not really what we're talking to people about the ownership piece, right? And you can invest, but if it's not about the investment, it's not really the financial reason why you're becoming an owner. So that's one class of ownership, community ownership. The other group of owners are the first and second floor owners of the nonprofit and business spaces. So that's similar to a housing cooperative, which you may be more familiar with, where it's similar to a condo development where people actually own their spaces, except with a condo, you have a real estate ownership interest, and with a cooperative, you own a share of the cooperative that's tied to the permanent lease for the space. And you make what feels like a mortgage payment, but is actually a rent payment. I'm sorry, you make what feels like a rent payment, but it's actually a mortgage payment, and people build equity over time. And so like if our restaurant food hall provider wanted to move out, they could sell that space to another restaurant food hall provider, and the co-op would approve who the new partner is. But in that way, it's still an equity investment for that business. We are capping the amount of return that the businesses can make to match that of the community owners, so that you can increase the value of your space 7% a year. And then and then there's a portion on top of that can come back to the cooperative, and the cooperative would manage that for the community and like use that money to manage the building for the community impact. And the cooperatives it's a nonprofit corporation. It's not a 501c3 because cooperatives have their own tax status. They're not 501c3s, they're subchapter T. It's just a different part of the tax code. But the co-op is still a nonprofit and is operated by a board that is selected by the tenant owners and by the community owners. So that's kind of the quick rundown or the medium length rundown.
So the community shares, when you have a community share, you have a vote as who the board members are, and then that board is more the governance.
Right. Although the community owners select 2 of the board members, and the tenant owners select select at least 3 and up to the majority. So the tenant owners do control more of what's happening in the building, which, that for us was, we want the community to be able to be engaged and be involved. But ultimately, it's really the tenant owners that are putting in a lot more of the work and energy and risk and understanding what's happening in the building. And the also, I'm a nonprofit attorney by trade, so I work a lot with different nonprofit organizations. And there's really, I think, you can engage people in a lot of ways in an organization, and the number of people that are just really excited to come vote on amendments to bylaws and adopt policies, and like, that tends not to be as engaging to people as or involving them in what's happening in the building and the activity, and get excited about what's happening there. So our take was, by doing like open book management and doing all these other pieces where we're bringing people into the building in other ways, that's probably going to be more exciting to them. I mean, that's just as meaningful, and in fact more meaningful a lot of times than like legal governance stuff that sometimes people have.
Gotcha. I think I was remembering at one point Neil was telling me about a part of the process where like the building kind of like tells you what it wants in it. I know that we've talked a lot about we have a lot of different sort of community needs that are already met. Like we've got a great coffee shop and a great bookstore and this and that. And so a part of this will be like scanning what we needs that are not yet met and like how to fill them. I remember Neil was talking about a process one time where the building just sort of like ends up telling you what it wants. But I've been curious about the idea coming first and dictating the building versus the building coming first and then dictating the idea of what actually fills it. Any thoughts about that?
I think I'd be curious to have people do different paths and then talk about how does it go and what are the different pros and cons and what did we learn from each of them. For us, the whole project started with the owner of a local coffee roasting company, who he really just had a vision of wanting to build this building to help redevelop this corridor in town. And we have a ton of water in our community. We have both an inland Lake Michigan, and a river, and there's almost no public restaurant cafe space on the water, which seems just crazy. So he really just had a vision of wanting to build an awesome riverfront cafe and redevelop the strip in a really pedestrian and bike friendly way. And I had just opened my co-working office and shared space, so he came to me and said, oh, hey, it seems like this would go well with a coffee shop. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And both he and I have a lot of experience with cooperatives and like that structure. He's worked with cooperatives of coffee growers, and I've worked with, in my legal world, just helping set up a variety of different types of cooperatives. And I do a fellowship with a group some of you might be familiar with, the Sustainable Economies Law Center, which is based in Oakland, and they've done a lot with real estate cooperatives. They're kind of good thought leaders in that area, and I've learned a lot from them about it. So we were like, oh yeah, let's do this as a real estate cooperative. And we just started talking to lots and lots and lots of people in the community and saying, what do you think would be cool here? What would be great to put in the spot? And we got a lot of feedback around the need for more family-friendly spaces, things for families to do together, things to bring different generations together. The art scene, we have a lot of visual and performing artists in town, and not enough spaces that really give people the opportunity to have, we have a very active music bar scene, but not a great performance space. We don't have great spaces to bring arts and family together. So we just sort of took what we heard from a lot of different conversations, and where, I think what you were saying, where is there energy around it? I thought of it as like a Jenga game, where like you can push really hard on a certain block, or you can just go with the block that comes right out. And like there were some things that I thought would be obvious to be awesome in the building, but like I pushed and the partners weren't just coming together and the momentum wasn't there. And then other blocks that just like I gave them a little tap and there was a lot of energy from other people and organizations. And I really thought of like my role as just like holding the door open and figuring out where the wind was was coming through the door of what wanted to exist in that building together, and where there were people that got the concept. And a lot of what we were talking about was creating this very collaborative space, you know. And I met with some people and showed them the floor plans and talked about the concept, and they were like, oh my gosh, that sounds really stressful. That sounds like a lot of people having to manage sharing a lot of space together. And it's like, yes, I am sure that is going to be true. But it's like that's the kind of problems that we're choosing to create with people that want to be in this building, that want the benefits of taking care of relationships and being very collaborative. So I think that our process, we didn't go to the community and say have focus groups or like co-design groups. It was much more of a just talk to lots and lots of people about what we're doing and see who's excited. And so we ended up with the building and its focus really being co-created with other small nonprofits and small business in town that saw a place for themselves in that building and saw the possibility of what we could create together. And that did for our crowdfunding and community outreach campaign. The fact that we had a bunch of existing organizations coming together to build it, it was very helpful for that, because those groups already had people that knew them and were excited about what they were doing, and we're excited to see those groups connected to each other. I feel like I'm rambling. Am I still answering the question you asked?
That's all awesome.
I'm going to ask one quick question. Laurie, well, how do you see the work you've done being a good way to prepare for what Kate's doing? Basically, you basically got an arts community that you've sort of co-created and established together, and that because of that, over the years, that you kind of have this cohesive group of creatives that has kind of created a nice landscape and breeding ground to actually do something like a cooperative. Can you speak a little bit about that and how that kind of provides a nice ground?
Yeah, and there's just all these creative minds and creative endeavors happening, and arts and music and just kind of media people tend to also be, I don't know, open-minded and loving of their community in a specific way, of thinking about what needs to move forward and how to move it forward. I know that Kayla Allred's on the call now. She has an amazing restaurant called Butcher Brewhouse and Bistro. She's focused on healthy, organic, and local foods. And I know that she's talked a lot about just the desire for a co-op around food. And there's, that is a need, like just a deep need our community has. And I think that just this caring kind of creative network of people that's willing to come together and really assess our community needs, and then sort of collectively allow something to emerge and have support. Because each one of the businesses in our downtown, and they're not all arts, businesses. There's a lot of different types of business. We got a brewery and coffee shop, and of course beekeeping, Blue Ridge Bee Company, and a lot of different types of endeavors, but it's all creative and innovative. And I think that we've all just been extremely supportive of each other. And I think each one that's come in has just kind of reported this neighborhood community feeling that seems to be unique. There's just like a lot of love and intention behind it. And I think that just creates a very fertile ground for something like this to emerge.
With what you've done in the past, how much was that? How did you add to what was already there, or help incubate what was already there? Were you attracting new people and things to town, or how did that process go for you guys?
It was all very personal and organic. Like each one of the businesses that have come in, it was from a very personal relationship. Like Butcher Brewhouse and Bistro got here because Brandon and Cece from Starry Eyes Media told her about the downtown, and Brandon reached out to me to ask about buildings when he was thinking about moving back in town and starting a business. And there, the pottery shop that came to town came because we happened to be gifted all this pottery stuff, and a coffee shop at the time where we're just all talking to each other about who wants to do a pottery shop, and that person's son ended up opening Blue Ridge Bee Company. And then we were all talking about this other building that needed to be activated, and the Blue Ridge Bee Company person told his best friend about the building. So it's all very one-on-one, personal, grassroots. There wasn't any top-down governmental strategy for business recruitment that happened. It was all just very like human beings who care and who want to make a difference and want to make an impact, like reaching out to each other and enabling each other and supporting each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds kind of similar, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions for Laurie regarding knowing what she knows, what she's gone through and experienced, and some of those skill sets could be that you could tap into or learn from or want to, learn more about.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious. So how much have you intentionally brought arts community together or tried to help facilitate those relationships? We're thinking about, we have we have the performing arts space, but we also just want to, in general, help be a connecting spot for connecting arts community to each other and to other organizations. And, obviously our town's not that big. People do already know each other to some extent, but I'm curious about if you have sort of advice about how to help foster those relationships.
Yeah, and every event that we do is really about bringing people together, and from Culture Fest to Earth Day to open mic nights, that regularity. But one event I like to pass on the formula to is All Together Arts Week, which is like a full week of arts connectivity, and it's about stoking collaboration and getting people to meet and find new ways to support each other and cross-pollinate. And so we basically start with a kickoff event, and that's where hopefully, it's in theory, everyone will come together and share this like networking talk and trade business cards and speed dating or whatever you want to do to cause the arts organizations and artists to connect and find ways to collaborate. And then we frame up anything that's going on arts-wise that week, anything anyone is doing that is in the realm of the arts, we throw it on the calendar and promote it and highlight it. And then there's Gallery House, where we have this special trolley, and we try to get everybody to get on board and go visit all the venues together. So we do like a tour on this like special trolley to encourage people like, oh, that venue you've always wanted to visit that you never, made yourself go do, now is the time. And we're all going to do it together. And so touring all the creative venues. And then we finish with this very colorful parade. It's just a very eccentric like art parade in the street. And it's more about marching down the street wearing ridiculous costumes and sharing that experience than it is about, putting on the show for the spectators, although that's fun too. But it's to showcase and highlight the vast realm and spectrum of arts activity that you have in your community that sometimes the community just almost is not completely aware of. And even the creative community might not be aware of each other. So the notion of showcasing that and shining the spotlight on it, and also for stoking collaboration and causing or catalyzing cooperation.
By the way, Sharon had a question. Sharon, if you want to unmute yourself.
Oh, I was just really just making a comment, just, like everything that I'm hearing from both Kate and Lori is, this beauty of the organic interaction and the gathering and the marching. And I can't help but apply it to like our current situation where we've taken that away essentially, but now we're replacing it with this, which is great. Because to be honest, Neil, I never would have talked to Lori if we didn't have this way that we're actually moving beyond just a street of Mercer or a small community in Traverse City, because even the intention of why it was built, a coffee shop, those are closed now. And so, what is our challenge if the original things that we were doing, these events, can no longer happen? Now what's the application?
And does anyone have any questions? Please raise your hand or comment or.
I have a quick comment on that. While others are raising their hand or unmuting themselves, I do think it's interesting. I think a lot about the tension between how great the organic relationship building is, and I do really like that. But then it also can be unintentionally very exclusive, right? Because if people have to have a relationship to be able to foster a relationship to what you're doing, that's very limiting. And so how do we make sure that we're reaching out to build those relationships to people that might not organically, without us really trying to include them, be connected to what we're doing, and or find people that would never find us just relying on that person-to-person kind of contact and growing. So anyhow, if anybody has any thoughts on that.
Okay, can you share the concept of adjacent possible? I know you feature it prominently in your work, and so does our group. But would you share what adjacent possible is and how that applies?
Sure. I learned the term from a Stephen Johnson book called Where Good Ideas Come From. And he's he looks at what's the research around how you help growth or innovation happen faster. And one of the ways is through what he calls the adjacent possible concept, where we think of it as people go from here to way over there in an aha moment, but actually people move very gradually and often in not very visible ways from here to here to here to here to here to here. And so if you want to increase the rate that people can grow and change and innovate, you increase the size of the network around them, but whether that's people or ideas, just in general, what they're exposed to. It's like whenever we're exposed to more people or ideas, what's possible for us becomes bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions while people are raising their hand, Laurie, if you want to respond to that.
I was like super inspired to just everyone I've been meeting through this network and having an amazing conversation with Sharon and her project earlier today and her tour with her interactive sculptural piece and deploying that, and now the shifting of how that's going to deploy. So that was an adjacent possible for me that's going to activate pretty quickly. I'm excited about that. Hoping to get to talk with Sharon more on Thursday in the breakout session about art and community building, and hope that a few of my Princeton people are going to join us for that.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Otherwise, I just have Laura and Kate continue, but if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand at any time and we'll just cue you for when there's a next pause. But Laura and Kate, if you want to continue.
Sure.
Oh, Billy has a question.
Oh.
Actually, y'all were talking about a little bit earlier how to connect artists and different community organizations and people together. I just actually had a comment that that's happening right now because of what's going on all over. So it's really, I feel like it's a great time to leverage this new communication through online events and through meetings like this to get people connected. I just had that comment.
And if anyone has any comments or things to share, please raise your hand as well. Comments, questions, or anything. Laura, you were saying?
Yeah. I've been curious when we talk about the co-ops and stuff about like the dynamics of decision making and like just the whole process and all the community shareholders and then the tenants. And I know we've talked about that a little bit, but I'm still just curious about what have the challenges been. And Neil had asked what the easy Jenga blocks were and the difficult Jenga blocks when you were talking about how ideas emerged. It's just kind of curious to hear a little bit more about the dynamic of all of that.
Yeah, I think, so much of what will be challenging in our journey, I think, is what will happen when we actually build the building. And then we have to figure out how to all live there together and how to make sure we're inviting everyone in the community into it. And I think, holding a culture in a space that feels welcoming and creative and where people feel comfortable kind of reaching for their growth edge and talking to people and trying things they might not try otherwise. That my guess is that will feel like the very challenging part. I mean, so far a lot of the challenge has been around learning real estate development, which, none of us that were involved in the project knew how to do real estate development or how to assemble complicated financing packages. Thinking about how to do an investment crowdfunding campaign and how to communicate what that meant to people and what it might mean for them to invest their, most people have never invested their own money, never thought about that they might be able to invest there if they did have retirement investment accounts, that they could invest that somewhere other than Wall Street and invest it themselves. And what is the way to do that responsibly? Because we don't want people to do it in a way that would be irresponsible, or we're putting a bunch of people's money at risk in a way that wouldn't be prudent. So I think a lot of our challenges so far have really been in that, the learning real estate development and communicating it and all learning together. But I think I'm very curious and excited for the experiment of what it's like to have that many people feel ownership in a building and how we hopefully can create the problems that come with a lot of people feeling ownership in the building. Because I think those are the problems we want, right? Is how to make that meaningful and really make people feel invested.
Yeah, actually, Kate, what was the Jenga block? What were the easy Jenga blocks and the hard Jenga blocks? Unless you don't want to share that.
I think it's Well, yeah, what would be some good examples of that? I mean, they're just for all the different elements of the building, you know, some of the different partners that we tried to work with or seemed like would be the obvious partners to work with. And just we ended up with some partners that, you know, were never who I would have expected from the beginning. And then other folks that seemed like, oh yeah, definitely those folks that ended up being more complicated for them. So yeah, I think it's a lot of it was just about kind of my expectation. Probably what defines the Jenga block being difficult is my expectation of how much those people should have been involved or wanted to be involved, more than what was actually happening with them. But Lori, I'm curious about I mean, it sounds like you've done a really great job of using like the artist community to build a much more broadly defined sense of a creative community that's spread to a lot of different business owners, and just almost just kind of attitude in the community that's this welcoming and friendly and creative community personality. Do you think, like, how much of that is already there and you're just helping exist it? How much of it do you feel like you're actively kind of helping support? I mean, I know not just you, but everybody who's working with you to hold that space. I think about culture building a lot and how you, what you need to do to help foster and support a really healthy culture. And it sounds like you guys have an awesome culture as a community. I'm curious if you have thoughts about how to do that well.
I appreciate that. And I think that some of the other people on the call might be able to have insight about that, specifically like what drew them here and how they feel about it. I'd be curious to know. I hope that that's the way that people feel. Like when we got here, you know, we had to kind of create a scene to exist within because it wasn't here when I moved back home back in 2004. And so we seeded Culture Fest very intentionally to be welcoming and open arms to draw people in and to make them feel welcome, and the open mic nights. And we're just really very persistent with that. And it was a very slow growth. Like we had to focus on, I always tell people that, you know, when 2 or more people are gathered together for a creative experience, you have to look at the value of that. And it was definitely like very small numbers at first. And we had to just see the value in a small group of people, like very slowly expanding. And so, but the culture was very intentional to be welcoming. And I hope that that's how people feel.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
Billy.
so probably off of Lori, is anyone in Princeton want to do a testament to what the work Lori's done, and as far as creating this culture that's ready to adopt something like what Kate's doing? Is anyone in Princeton ready to like share, you know, Lacey?
I would, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, the first thing that drew me to Princeton is I came to Princeton for the first time for an art market that Lori invited me to. And I had met her at an Earth Day event and helped her with Culture Fest the year before. And the first thing that I noticed was the public art, the murals that are everywhere, and these beautiful sculptures that are on the streets. And that initially got me thinking that maybe one day I'd want to come here. And that's exactly what ended up happening. And we live right on Mercer Street now. And it's just been like an incredibly facilitating environment. Like I started before, you know, the whole quarantine thing happened. Lori helped me start this event called the Heart Market, which was an art market for, you know, people that didn't have a creative space or people that were trying to get into the art scene but didn't really have any avenue to do so yet. And even though it was an absolute whiteout, it was a blizzard with an ice storm and the roads were terrible, but still it was a packed event. Like hundreds of people came in and out throughout the night. And it was just something that was really beautiful. So everybody here is really supportive of the arts, and it's really awesome.
I have to say as well that when I started working with my business on Mercer Street, Lori just came to me with open arms. You know, she's very welcoming, very helpful. Anything that she could do for me, she would. And she's always a wealth of information. And I don't think anybody works harder than Lori does at building downtown. And I'll never be able to sing her praises high enough. And I know she's sitting there just embarrassed almost because she doesn't look for the attention. She doesn't do what she does for the attention. She does it for her love of our community. And I think that's a big reason why we're growing the way we are.
I feel like everyone too, it's like it takes one to know one kind of thing, and we're attracted to each other like magnets because everyone on this call is of that same spirit. And so As you all feel supported by each other too, right? I feel like I've heard from a lot of the businesses that like the cooperative culture of the businesses supporting each other is really strong. Everybody's just so willing to help.
And can you share a little bit about your meeting last Friday, Lori, about basically kind of discussing how the interest in adopting Kate's model in Princeton?
Yeah, I'd shared conversations with people that I thought would resonate with this. I know Neil reached out in right at the beginning of February. I think it was like as January ended, and I was so fired up, and I just started seeding conversations with people that I knew would resonate with that topic. And then you gave me the book. Then I have all the different copies, so I distributed the book to a few different people, and oh, so yeah, the book Interdependent Capitalism, yep, by June Yoon. And so I knew that a lot of my friends would resonate with that, so I kind of distributed the book to a few people, and then yeah, I just asked people if they were willing to come together for just a next step kind of informational call, and was really grateful that I guess it was about like 25 people that were able to come on the call, and then like a handful more that were really sad that they forgot or couldn't log on for some reason. But I feel like there was a strong energy. Did you all feel that way? Like people were just down for the ride?
I wonder how much, I mean, I think for our community, part of what we're hoping Commongrounds can help do is actually just provide like a physical space that's a connection point. Is that something that you guys feel like would be beneficial, or do you have that already with what's happening?
What do you mean? Like, can you repeat that?
Yeah, I feel part of our project, the goal is just to provide a physical space that is the connection point, you know, that holds a certain culture and is a connection point for a lot of different groups and activities in town. Because we have the fortunate problem that it sounds like you guys have too, of a very creative entrepreneurial spirit. We have a lot of people out there doing cool stuff and working on it, and just helping create a place that everybody feels a little bit of home and where they can do a little bit of what they're doing to help connect to other people and learn from what other people are doing and create a space for collaboration. Is that something that you guys could feel the need for too, or does that already exist for you?
I think so. I think.
Yeah, sorry, just to preface, Lori, I think, and just to catch both of you up. So Lori, the meeting was about actually finding buildings. Talk about the possibility of finding buildings to renovate to become a Catalyst hub. So Kate's project is a brand new building from scratch that's not built yet. And the meeting on Friday with Lori was actually, are they interested in the model to eventually get to the point of like identifying buildings to actually transform into becoming physical Catalyst hubs? Lori, go ahead.
Yeah, because there's a few different buildings on our street that just, you know, have yet to be activated or that need to change hands. And the traditional model has just been like, we just try to find somebody to come in and buy a building and someone to start a business. And in some cases that's the same person, but it's just been, you know, slow moving, and also the entry point for people that want to have a say in what's next haven't had an entry point. So this model just seems like great next steps for these new different buildings that need to be activated. You know, we've got some great buildings on the street. Hey, Brandon.
One of the really neat things about our new studio space is that we have a very large room. We haven't really came up with the proper name for it yet, but we recently invested in some projector equipment and that sort of thing because we started a new gig with the state doing workshops. And so one of our intentions with our new space before, you know, the obvious happened with the pandemic, once we got it set up and going, was to potentially use it as a sort of a community space that where we could, you know, host workshops that were entrepreneur related that would help with basics like, you know, how to claim your Google My Business, i.e. don't fall for the scam calls that they want to charge you $300 so they claim your listing for you, and you know, that type of basic stuff, and potentially use it for other types of entrepreneurial things that wasn't necessarily hosted by us, where Starry Eyes would be leading the conversation and the education portion. So that's something that I would like to put on the table for when we can get to that point, obviously, where we could all be in a room together, and not spaced so far apart. But that's on the table for the future for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're really lucky to have like spaces like that. And, you know, Tammy's got a community room, and like a lot of us that have businesses downtown, like the coffee shop and the Riff Raff, all have like spaces. So we're very, very lucky to have these gathering points. And so, yeah, there's a lot of ways for us to kind of connect.
Yeah, one idea that Lori was also talking about is that, well, actually, when we first talked about Catalyst Hubs, Lori said, you know, actually, we kind of already have a Catalyst Hub. So she actually is in a building that has a third floor that is an open space for co-creation, and that you know, she talked about like having that be an open space for testing out, being a laboratory for what could go on in a building once it's renovated.
Yeah, and there's a laboratory at Starry Eyes and a laboratory at in the bookstore, and all these different ways. And
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple of different types of problems or opportunities that our project works on, and some of which might apply to you and some might not. You know, one piece was just creating the way for people to be able to generate wealth by investing in real estate in their community, and be, you know, intentional about where they're investing in and why, and to learn about that and have the opportunity to do it. And another was to create capital through that means, but for something that otherwise might be difficult to finance or invest. You know, our development has a bunch of things that don't traditionally happen in real estate development, because it's very difficult for a real estate developer to think about an early childhood family center and a performing arts center and a nonprofit co-working spaces, things that they could figure out how to make pay for themselves or be reliable tenants. So it was creating capital to help support the creation of those things that might not happen otherwise. And so and then the cooperative ownership piece is, for us, was really about the engagement of, you know, I use the example of that people are mug club owners in local brew pubs, so they're more likely to go there than the other brew pub because it feels like their brew pub and they feel some pride in it. And we wanted this to be a space where lots of people felt welcome and it felt like their space. And so kind of experimenting with, well, what if it is actually your space and you're an owner and it's owned by the community, and that just the story that tells about why the building's there and what's happening there. So anyways, I don't know, just in listening to you talk, I was like, oh, maybe there's pieces of this that you guys are interested in, but maybe it's not all of it. And, you know, the cooperative ownership meets some aspects of that, but you could do investment crowdfunding without cooperative ownership and still build capital for some cool things from the community and give the community the opportunity to invest in it. But you may not need that cooperative ownership buy-in piece for all of it, or there may be things that you don't need the capital for, but it's great to have the community ownership piece in.
yeah, really interesting.
Yeah. So I had, oh, Sharon, you have a question. You're muted. Yeah.
I do have a question. When you speak about like investment crowdfunding compared to the co-op model, so I actually have two questions. Are you just talking about like a strict Kickstarter campaign or Indiegogo or some such thing, and that it's investing in an idea about something or a product, or is investment crowdfunding something different, like you got your second floor people to actually invest in the property itself with the possible return? Like, how is that different from, I get the co-op with the $50.
Oh, she froze.
Oh, that's too bad. Laura, you're going to make a comment, sorry, earlier.
Oh, I was just going to say, I am really interested in the whole community ownership and actual investment side of things, like the shareholding. I think people are really resonated with that in our community, and we've mentioned it. Just the notion of building community wealth and allowing people to have the experience of having that buy-in.
Well, I wanted to share, and this is because we're nearing the end of the call, but I wanted to present to Kate and Lori. There's a few people here that actually represent impact investment. And so I want to give both of you an opportunity to say, if you had the opportunity to work with outside impact investment, where would you love to see that impact investment investing in? And if Kate doesn't come back, I have an answer for her. But like if she does, I'll repeat the question. Did you hear what the question was? What I just presented, Kate?
I heard Sharon's question. I did not hear, and then I'm sorry, my computer battery died. Now
Yeah.
I'm plugged.
Okay. What I was sharing was that, so we're nearing the end of the call, and there's a couple of people here who actually represent outside impact investment. The people who can come, who are interested in understanding what the stakeholders of a community are interested in, and bringing in outside investors to invest in what those stakeholders need to, support, be responsive to their needs. So I want to ask both of you, given this opportunity, if you could attract impact investment to your community, what would it be? How would that best work with your stakeholders?
Yeah, so we have a theater in our town, and it tugs at people's heartstrings. There are so many people in so many towns who have attachments to their town's historic movie theater. And this was historically the Royal Theater in and then it became the Levon Theater in the 50s, and I guess 1920 maybe, I can't remember when it was a Royal Theater when it was established, but it's this beautiful theater, and it has tugged at people's heartstrings and represents the heart and soul of the community. And we, a nonprofit called Community Connections, back when we started the Renaissance in 2013, was able to purchase that theater, and the community was just unbelievably excited. And it has been a lot of volunteer labor have gone in to gut the theater, and there's been some, let me show you a picture of it. Can I share my screen with you?
Yeah.
It has had a lot of work done to it. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done to it. Gosh, this is, can you see my screen? No.
Not yet.
Not yet, okay, I gotta share it. A lot of work that still needs to be done to it, but I guess that's the Renaissance Theater. Well, that's an acrobat in front of the Renaissance Theater. Let's see here. But I would love for the community, what it would look like for the community to have ownership over this theater would be incredible. And I think they would just tear down all the walls of, that's their thing, or that's not my thing. For the community to have ownership over this theater would be absolutely beautiful. I wish I would have been prepared to share that. I guess I'm going to stop sharing my screen now because I wasn't prepared with the photos,
as an example, how impact investment would help is that if someone needs to provide the bridge financing to buy the theater, to then hold it for the co-op to then purchase shares and buy it out from the impact investor. So some kind of, in that case, you would need a bridge investor to actually just buy the building or other buildings and hold it until the co-op can buy it out.
That.
And then, so Kate, I am pretty familiar with what the needs are there. Would you mind sharing?
Sure. Well, I'd say we have both the immediate need for our project, but then also I have thought a lot about too, just in general, what are ways you could structure these investments. So for our project, we still need about $250,000 equity investment, which could, we can basically either pre-sell a tenant space and then rent it to a tenant. So it could be investment in a future space in the building. We own the land, and it could be an investment in the land. That's one structure that could work in other places too, where you're building a new building where we have an LLC that owns the land, that's owned by investors and by the cooperative, and then the cooperative will own the building when it's built and then buy the investors out of the LLC. So it's the investors' investment is secured by the land, so it's a little bit more secure while we're getting to the point where we're building the building. But I think if I were doing it all over again, I would have structured ours a little bit different for the community investment, because our community investment is very risky. They're basically the riskiest investors in the whole building. And what we told the community was like, well, everybody's risking a little bit. Like, don't invest more than you could afford to lose. And we're going to make this thing happen by all of us together risking a little bit. But I think that there are ways that you could structure it to have an impact investor, either match the community investment or have the community investors be a part of a loan guarantee, because traditionally real estate development, you need a big loan guarantee by somebody who's wealthy and can guarantee that to the bank that they'll be repaid. And the challenge for a lot of people in doing real estate development is that we don't have, none of us have $14 million that we can guarantee to the bank that they're going to get their money back. But you could create a pooled fund of that was impact investment combined with community investment that could be that loan guarantee fund. That would also make it easier to access the funds. I've also been brainstorming with an affordable housing developer in Michigan who works a lot with affordable housing tax credits. And I'm not as familiar with them, but he has really creative ways about how you can use state housing bonds to give impact investors the ability to invest in state housing bonds, which is, a very safe investment would be a lower return, and then use that to leverage the equity for the rest of the project.
Hey, aloha, take two. I'm so happy that you're all here and we're all getting a chance to connect and grow these ideas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Kate and Lori, each of you give me one noun and one verb about involved in your whole thing. Let's say, Kate, you go first and we'll make it into the song.
Oh boy. I'll say bird because we called all of our owners birds. There are birds. And,
all right.
And for a verb, I'll say adjacent possibly.
Adjacent possibly. All right. And all right, how about you, Lori?
All right, activating for my verb. And I don't know, lion.
Okay. All right.
I'm looking at a lion right now.
Here we go. I was an animal waiting to be set free in a zoo full of impossibility. Ooh, and I had an idea. Ooh, I know I might be the king of the beast, but there's an adjacent possibility my feather friend could release me. So I made a proposition. Ooh, would you help me and tell all of your bird friends if they can free me, I'll no longer eat them and we can be friends. Ooh, so this sparrow, he shot off like an arrow. He told the ostrich and the pelican, can you help me, my five-feathered friend? I'm really trying to help liberate that lonely lion. Let's fly him over the gate. If we activate all our wings, we don't have to wait. There's a possibility if we all use our flight abilities in unity. Oh, if you look up outside of your quarantine window, you might just see something flying by. It's a lion who dreamt to try.